for tuning into the Richard Brown Show today. Before I get started with my guests, I want to take just 1 second and talk about what the show is all about. This show right here is a space where African Americans can show the positive things that's happening in the community. Far too often, what I found is that there are negative images of African Americans that are out there. And so what the show is about is trying to show you that there are so many other things that are happening in the community. This show in specific is going to give you some context. You know, so many times we hear certain beats or certain things on the radio, and those things are connected to what we're going to be talking about today. So I want to thank you for tuning in today. If you get a chance, go ahead and check out the website at richardbrownshow.com. There'll be past shows there, all sorts of information there. You can shoot me an email there or contact me if you so desire. So let's get right into it. Let me introduce my guest, and we'll get him to talk a little bit about the sound, the drums. I'm just kind of excited about this opportunity because the drums speak, and they speak to many races, not just African Americans. But I do feel like they do speak to African Americans in a deep and profound way. Please share your name and talk a little bit about how you got into playing the drums.
All right. Well, first off, I want to say hello, everybody. Hello, world. My name is Atiba Rorie, and I am a percussionist. What that basically means is I play instruments that you make music by striking them. I've been playing music pretty much my entire life. I got into it. My dad, he was in the band in high school and was in the band in college, and he was into it a lot. He was into music real heavy. And, you know, my mom was always a supporter of the arts and worked in the arts. And so because of that foundation, you know, I kind of just gravitated right into music. Friends of the family were musicians and such. And so hanging around them, and I started playing music and really gravitated towards percussion instruments. And yeah, that's pretty much the story. And now I'm here in North Carolina. I pretty much grew up here. Came here when I was about 9 or so, and I play all sorts of percussion instruments. But mainly, what I specialize in is West African and Afro-Cuban style percussion instruments. I play other things as well, classical instruments, snare drum, timpani, marimba, and such. But my primary focus and drive is really more so focused on the West African music and Afro-Cuban music and actually pretty much Africa and the diaspora, because Africa is a very large place and Africans are all over the world now. And when they got to these new places in the world, they had to recreate their music from home. So, with the added influences of other places along with their own cultures, they merge things, and you get quite interesting things when that happens, and I'm really interested in that, and yeah, it's kind of my passion. Keeps me up at night at times.
Right. So now, when you say that it's keeping you up at night, are you saying that there's beats that's kind of rolling through your head, and there are multiple? So, for example, this weekend or 2 weekends ago, there was this piece that I saw that talked about African art and the mask that you see, not just the Dogon people, but really, West Africa, what you're talking about. And one of the things they talked about is that a lot of people are buying these masks, but you got to see the mask in the ceremony. So there's this live dynamic that's happening with the music, that's happening with the ceremony. Talk to me about how you're kind of going at this, because you talked about, and I'll use your word, classic. When you say classic, what I'm hearing is classical European style music, where there's sheet music. Talk about the difference in your head and how you see how you use both of them. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, when you speak about mask in particular, masks a lot of times in African cultures, actually cultures all over the world, because cultures all over the world have some form of theater, and a lot of times the mask is about that theatrical thing. Now, other cases, the mass is attached to a spiritual reference, such as things like that. And a lot of times music is played to accompany the mass, because people in Africa use music for pretty much everything. It helps them get through daily life, and when you speak about West Africa in particular, their music is there to communicate what's happening in life, so, and the differences between when you talk about like classical, quote unquote, Western European music, yes, they write things down and they have, people compose music, but before, their music wasn't really written either. It was kind of in the same format, but with, evolution and things like that, they wanted to share their music over a broader scale, so they started writing things down and composing new music, which happens the same way in Africa. People, there are new pieces of music that are created by people all the time and are shared. It's just that sometimes the misconception is that because African music is not per se written, it's not complex. But when you actually get into the detail and the study of it, it can be as complex as any style of music there is. And even, to the point where a lot of people associate just drums with Africa. But there are all sorts of instruments that come from Africa. There are string instruments, wind instruments, all sorts. There are people that sing, beautiful singers, beautiful singers, and they come up with their own compositions. And so it's quite an interesting thing. How I don't know how it happened, but it's that people have an assumption that because African music is not quote unquote written, that it's not important or it's not.
Let's talk about how the music is transferred down, because I'm very clear that there are certain beats, there are certain sounds, there's certain let's even break it down to vibrations that are being passed down and that are very powerful. And that, so I studied music when I was young, and there's certain, specifically when you start talking about jazz, there's certain standards,
right?
And those standards are passed down. And one of the things that's going to happen when you meet other percussionists, you're going to check them out and be like, okay, does he know the standards?
Right.
Talk about that as it relates to how that is passed down, or how people pick that up and translate that, because it is getting transferred, but I don't think it's talked about as much.
Well, one of the ways that the music is passed on, and actually not just the music, almost everything in the life, because you can't really separate the music from the culture because it's a part of the culture. Just like here, you have the rock culture, the pop culture, the hip hop. It's all integrated. But the music specifically is passed down from teacher to student, teacher to student, teacher to student, and it's a long-term apprenticeship that a person takes with their teacher to learn this music. And also, there are responsibilities that the musician has, just like the jazz music. Way back when, it was played to make people happy, make people feel good, people come and they dance and such. The same thing is the case in West Africa. So when you talk about the movement and frequencies, because everything is in motion. So if you find the same frequency that something else is moving at, then you start moving together. And to do that, it takes a long study, and it's actually something that's really scientific when you think about its nature, but it is something that also becomes innate inside of a person that has taken the time to study how music affects people. And a lot of it is watching your teacher, your trainer, and watching what they do and how it affects people, and say, okay, if this happens, and so on and so forth. It's quite interesting, because of that passing down of things, and music in a way, it's something so special, because, for example, a friend of mine said this, and it really stuck with me well, that if you have a 4-minute conversation with somebody, 4 minutes of conversation, the next day you usually cannot remember every word that's said. But your favorite song that you listen to on the radio may be 4 minutes long, and you know every single word to that song.
That's right. So
through the music, you know, that's how things can be taught. That's how things can be learned. You know, you can. It's quite a magical thing how all of that happens.
There's something very specific as it relates to legacies being passed down, specifically within the drums. And in the past, when I've studied specific African history, African American slaves in America, different drums were used to transfer messages across miles upon miles. And there are so many different legacies, and I just wanted you to kind of reflect on, you know, how you feel about being in the midst of that type of legacy.
Well, I feel that I have a very huge responsibility, and my responsibility is first and foremost to maintain what has been given to me, maintain it, and then when it becomes to the point that, you know, I am chosen to pass it on, to give it the same way it was given to me, but also to take what I have learned and use it to reach people, use it to you know, use it to help people, use it to help heal people, use it in good ways. And you know, when you speak about passing messages, that's a very important thing. And even now, you know, when you listen to popular music of today, that's what the songs, you know, you can pass good messages, you can pass bad messages. And using the music, that's how it's done. Now, when you speak about, a lot of times in Africa, it's just that you can do it without lyrics. You can do it with just the music, because West Africa specifically, when we talk about the people there are rhythms and dances that are done for certain occasions. So if I'm here and I hear they're playing a particular rhythm, I may know, oh, okay, the chief of the next village, his birthday is today. That's the rhythm for that. So I'm going to go and celebrate with them and bring gifts. And it's quite, once you're in tune with it and kind of understand it, and people that are raised up in that culture, that are there living it every day in West Africa, they recognize these rhythms because they learn it as babies from children.
Right. It literally is a language within itself, and that if you grow up in it,
right.
And so there's that one piece, and what, especially for African Americans, because so much of that culture. So when I studied this, what really piqued my interest was that the use of drums were outlawed because they were used to rally people, because they were used to pass on messages. And so when I start thinking about legacy, when I hear pop music and I ask young folks, well, what's the message? And a lot of times they're like, I don't even know. I just like the beat, you know? And I've heard that so many times. What I'm hearing is that there has been something that's been passed down and continues to be passed down all the way back from a connection that's much 3, 4, 5, 10 generations. And that's what I hear, you know?
Well, I believe this. You can take the instruments from the people, but you can't take the music out of the person.
Gotcha.
So really what it is reconnecting with what you already have, what you already have been given, and you're born with it, whether you like it or not. You know, whether you listen to it or not, whether you choose to move with it or not. Because some people choose to move with different styles of music. Some people, you know, they don't like jazz, or, you know, they don't like R&B, but they listen to, you know, hip hop, or, you know, things like that. And yeah, when you talk about taking the instruments away, it was a integral part of actually, you know, keeping African people